Hello, my loves, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Get Your Guy Coaching podcast. I have a special guest with me today. It's a former client, and her name is Sunny. And I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to just talk about what a journey looks like in the Get Your Guy Coaching program. And so I thought Sunny would be a really good guest for us to talk about all of those things, the ups, the downs, the trials, and the tribulations, because it's not all roses. It is some thorns too sometimes. And so without further ado, Sunny, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I love it. I'm so glad that you're here. So why don't we start by just telling people a little bit about you and just like how you heard about me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I am an editor by day. And so a lot of what I do is behind a computer screen. And in the past, I had an online business. And so Coach Anwar and I were in the same circles, so to speak, online. And so that's how I came across him. And I realized that like I needed some additional help with how I was showing up in relationships. And so that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you. I'm so glad that you did.
Yes, absolutely. It was worth every penny.
Let's talk about that because, like, you and I both know that nobody's really wanting to ask for help these days. So, how did you get over that in yourself, especially as it pertains to dating and relationships?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, I realized that I was like repeating some patterns. I saw there were some patterns going on in my relationships. And so this is, over time from when I first started dating, like as a teenager until now. And so I realized that like if I really wanted to have a good relationship and show up in a relationship in a way that I could really value and appreciate, that I really needed to get some help and figure out what was going on. So that's exactly why I reached out.
Yeah. So, girl, what were those patterns, girl? Don't act shy now. You on the podcast, girl. Don't try to
Listen.
give me this vague overview, girl.
I tried to be vague. It didn't work.
And the people at home or in their cars are like, "Oh, girl, what were the patterns, girl? Because I might have them myself."
Right? So, okay, first things first is I think I realized that I was breaking up with every guy that I dated. I mean, that was something that we haven't talked a whole lot about, but I think that was something that initially I think I felt really proud about.
Yeah. And why was that? Why were you proud of it?
I think I was proud of it because in some ways there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of optimism, and there's a sense of not like becoming someone kind of downtrodden in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I felt very proud because it kind of eliminates that whole like stereotype of being like the ride or die woman, and I'm not a ride or die, but that type of thing like kind of flies in the face of that stereotype. I never wanted to be that person.
Yeah.
So
thank you for sharing that. I think that's so important because there's a lot of women that do the exact same thing. And what I know for sure is that they are protecting their hearts and that they don't want to be heartbroken. And also they don't want to be abandoned. This is an abandonment wound that we are trying to protect more so than anything else. As someone who has a ton of them, I can even personally say that, right? So have that I'm going to break up with you before you break up with me pattern. What other patterns did you have?
Yes. So the I'm going to break up with you before you break up with me pattern. I think too, I struggled with deciding on how I wanted to show up in relationships in terms of, let's put it very simply, masculine and feminine energy.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to kind of like, number one, what kind of partner I wanted, which kind of would determine a little bit of how I wanted to show up in relationships. But also I think I struggled with being in touch with my emotions and my feminine side, which made it really hard for me to have good relationships. And so I think that those are definitely some of the larger overall patterns that I continued throughout relationships.
I'm so happy that you talked about this because you aren't the only Black woman who maybe didn't feel comfortable in her feminine and have enough trust with the people around her as well as within herself to just sit in that and be okay with that, right? And so part of the work that we do, and we'll definitely talk about this a little bit later, is just understanding where that comes from and like do you want to do that or not?
Right. For sure.
More than
Exactly.
anything else. And so, you're not alone in that. And there's so many other women that are having the same questions about not just how do I show up, or am I in my masculine or am I in my feminine, but who the hell am I?
Right. Totally. Yeah. And I think a lot of times who we are is kind of predetermined for us based on like our culture and how we're nurtured. Obviously nothing to do with nature, but like how we're nurtured and how we're told that we need to show up. And I think a lot of times, especially growing up, I felt the need to kind of prove my worth through being smart, being intelligent, through like performing and showing people that I was worth this or I was best at this. And so I definitely felt I had to step into that zone as opposed to just kind of being able to take a step back and not have to prove anything. And so that was a really, really big struggle that I had going forward. And also I think it confused me because I was told that I'm a mature child, or I was, so mature as a child. And hearing that from adults, it's like, well, let me prove to these adults that I'm responsible. Let me prove that I think I really struggled with like having a childhood and just being able to be free and just being able to relax and experience childhood the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So, and the other thing is like, when you're always like the good girl, that adulation, that acknowledgement gets really addictive. And like, it's like the only way that you get attention because nobody's checking for you because they know you're going to be fine.
Exactly. So people aren't really checking in with you. They're not like seeing how you're doing or how you're adjusting. They think, well, she can take care of herself. So what, who are the people who actually need help?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So you heard about me and then we had a consultation call. So talk to me a little bit about that. Were you nervous? Were you like, oh, I'm going to work with him? Did you not know? Talk to me about your experience with that.
I definitely distinctly remember the conversation.
Why is that, girl?
Because I was honestly, I think I felt like I didn't feel like you were judging me. I felt immediately like you were my friend in my head, and you know what I mean. So I didn't. I just felt initially very close with you in a way that made me feel like I kind of let my guard down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was worried. Sometimes I think with especially in like the coaching industry, I think people fall very hard on one side of the fence or the other when it comes to an issue or like a particular situation or whatever. And I think your approach in that initial call helped me realize that there are some things that we have to figure out here. And it's okay that we don't have a solution today. It's okay that we don't come to a solution at this moment, because I have that quality where it's like, I need to be yes or no. I need to be a black or a white, or I need to be a red or a green. And that nuance is important, and I just needed to make sure that I was working through the situation fully before kind of making the next big decision.
That's so interesting that you bring that up, because one of the reasons why I work with high achieving women, because it's 100% or nothing, right? But relationships and love is like being okay with being at the 60 and 70, like just like being comfortable there versus sprinting. It's about the marathon. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of deprogramming to get to a place where you can actually just feel comfortable in a relationship and also just feel comfortable being loved in that way. Yes, not loved hard or not at all, but just loved.
Yes. A reasonable daily sunny with clouds type of love, just regular every day. And I think that too was also very difficult for me, because I didn't really grow up with the whole fantasy fairy tale. And maybe a lot of other Black women can relate. Like, I didn't grow up with that fantasy of some prince is going to whisk me away. Like, I just didn't have that. And so
we didn't see it in our real life.
We didn't. And we didn't see it in our real lives. Absolutely not. And then also, I think people expect Black women to earn love. And I think it was really hard for me to kind of experience being in a good relationship without feeling like I had to kind of like, it was weirded out. I was weirded out by how normal it was. And so that freaked me out because I'm used to the turbulence.
I'm so glad that you mentioned this, because that's what's like, I think it's so interesting when people get into a relationship when they're in the program and then they're like, they freak out and they want to sabotage it because it is not like anything that they've ever experienced before. Totally. And so it's like, they're so focused on the familiar chaos that when there's peace, it's so uncomfortable and they don't even want it.
It feels like, is this enough? Is it a good thing, or
Yeah.
is it, should I constantly, if I don't have to constantly prove my worth or constantly prove that I'm lovable or constantly prove something about myself, like, and things are just fine. And the love is stable, and I don't have to worry that I'm going to come home to someone different than I left. If that's happening, it was a very uncomfortable experience, and I didn't realize that. I didn't realize how uncomfortable it would be. But it was uncomfortable in a good way that I realized.
So we had this consultation, and was there anything that resonated with you during that conversation, and how are you feeling afterward?
I knew immediately that I wanted to work with you, and I don't remember exactly what was said, but I remember how I felt.
Okay.
And I felt a sense of like nervousness, but a sense of relief at the same time. I definitely trust your coaching style. I trust your opinion. I trusted that you were going to help me realize the blind spots that I had. I'm excelling in my career. I'm excelling in other areas. What's going on with this relationship? What's going on with this relationship stuff? And I definitely felt that you were going to give me the real. You were going to help me really dig in and figure out how I could show up as my best self in a relationship.
Yes, girl. Always.
Oh, yes,
always.
Nothing but.
So one of the interesting things that I hear is that a lot of people don't want to book that consultation call because it's like, it feels very real. It's like talking to a stranger. So what would you say to those individuals that maybe have been thinking about it for a couple of weeks or a couple of months and need to just not do it?
I would first of all ask, what are you waiting for? Because I truly, honestly believe that the work that we've done in the last 6 months was worth its weight in gold, and it was worth every single penny. So I would ask, like, first of all, what are you waiting for? Especially if you are a high achieving Black woman or someone who is running at full speed all the time, I would pick up the phone. Don't even hesitate. And I don't say that because I'm trying to help. I say that because I think first step is actually like dedicating yourself and committing yourself to the process. And it is uncomfortable at times, but I think it was totally transformational for me, truly.
Well, thank you. I'm happy about that. We love what we do here, girl. It's all about that transformation.
Yes.
So let's talk about that transformation. Let's talk about working together. So there's been a lot, like I was saying before, trials and tribulations. So I just want to just share with the audience that Sunny actually came into the program in a relationship. And so the getting your guy was not necessarily getting her guy, but it was understanding her guy and also understanding herself in the relationship. So let's talk about working together and some of the things that we really focused on. What were some of the things that you really found a lot of benefit from?
Absolutely. So the first thing that we worked on was just understanding my feelings, which honestly it took quite a long time it took a very long time, at least I think, to get in touch with my feelings. Our weekly calls, he would say like, well, how do you feel? And I would always say, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm okay. And one of the very first lessons that he taught me was saying I'm fine, okay, I'm good is a moment that's being lost where you can actually be vulnerable with the other person and have that conversation and be vulnerable about how you truly feel. But in order for me to do that, I actually had to know how I felt. So
that's right.
That was the first thing, is like figuring out when someone asks you, how are you doing, to be honest. Because sometimes at work, it's like, oh, you're just trying to like get through the small talk and everything like that. But when you're talking about friendships, relationships, and even at work, being able to say, well, actually, I'm a little tired today. And being able to explain like why that is. Well, I'm a little tired because I stayed up last night late or whatever, I've been working hard or something like that, whatever. So that was the first thing that helped me break my pattern of, is just like being authentic with people. And I honestly felt like I couldn't be authentic with people because I think, and again, maybe this is just me, but I think growing up, I grew up in like multiple judgmental, pressure-filled environments. And I don't know that we would see them that way, but just like I'm realizing now that I'm older, it was really hard to be honest. And because there wasn't any room for failure in some sense, so to speak, failure in quotes, of course. And I think my parents and my family and my extended family did all the best that they could do. But I think it's one of those things that, especially as Black people, we struggle with because we're constantly being scrutinized. But anyway, so
it sounds like you were becoming becoming more and more emotionally honest. And how did that
Absolutely.
translate into your relationship, girl?
It helped me realize why I was having so much conflict, because part of the conflict was, you're not doing what I think is the right thing to do. And I'm upset. I'm mad. You're not doing the right thing I think you should do, which, first of all, this is how I feel about everybody, right? I feel like I have the right answers. So this is no shade to my partner, but like, I feel like I have all the right answers. I feel like I'm the person who knows what's best. And so therefore, if anyone doesn't know what's best and they defy me, then I feel
goddess. Sorry. Oh, goddess.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel slighted about that. And so I think what I realized, number one, was that I can't argue people down. Part of the issue of, and I've struggled with this, not just in romantic relationships, but with just friendships in general too, of just being emotionally aware, having that emotional EQ to recognize that people relate much more to feelings than they do thoughts and logic and numbers and things like that. And so I've always struggled with relationships because of that, because my brain is always like, well, what is the right answer? As opposed to, well, how do you feel? And so it's been a struggle for me. So that was one of the biggest things that we worked on. And so in relationships, I would always be like, well, this is what you should do. Well, this is the right thing. Not realizing that people want to feel that warmth. They want to feel that comfort. They want to feel heard and understood. And I want that too. I always feel better when I have it. So that's one of the biggest things that I think has just transformed me personally in relating to other people, anyone really.
I think sometimes people think of like the work as a dating coach is like, now you're going to text this to the guy and then he's going to do whatever you want and da 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 da.
Yeah. But, well, you hear that a lot.
Yeah. And I think I'm so glad that you're sharing that this is about who you are and how you relate and connect with other people.
Absolutely.
That's what this work is about more so than anything else.
And I didn't expect that going. I mean, I knew there was.
What did you expect, girl? What did you expect?
Well, let me rephrase it. I think I just kind of didn't know what to expect. I think I've seen a lot of people talk about, oh, like women have to be soft and delicate and meek and mild, and that will make a man fall to his knees and do all, and then I think that's a very, very, very simplified, but also kind of confusing, because it's like, shouldn't love be that the other person loves you for who you are?
That's
truly?
Right.
For who you truly are. And so I'd seen like your videos like on social media and everything like that. And I just was intrigued because I really felt like you, being a Black man, understood the culture that we come from and what struggles Black women especially struggle with. And I felt seen and understood. So I think part of what I expected was that you were going to be honest with me. I didn't honestly expect the feelings part. I didn't know, because we don't talk about feelings.
Right.
As Black people, we don't talk about feelings typically. I'm just obviously generalizing here.
If people got a problem in the household, then mom comes and says, "Okay, time to eat," and that's the forgiveness.
That's how she.
That's
how
she
apologizes.
That's an apology.
Okay, do you want to go to the store?
And then you eat or you get something, and that's your forgiveness.
And that's it.
Yes.
We move on. We don't talk about it, especially with like, cultural hierarchy and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Like, it's very strong. And so I think our Black culture doesn't get enough respect in how codified our culture actually is. It's a whole nother conversation for another day. I think it was a big struggle for me.
And you've been rocking it out now. So I think that's been really good. And I think that, it's really hard to take that next step and to do things that are different than what you're used to doing. I remember early on in the program, I would say, okay, that's how you're feeling and that's what you want. Now it's time to communicate that. And you'd be like, but no, I can't.
No, I don't want
to. And then I would get sterner. Girl, do it.
Yes. Explain, because you know what, the people who really care about you will hear you, and if they can't hear you right away, they'll figure out how to start hearing you. And I think I'd grown up, and again, this is no shade to my family and friends or whatever, but I think I grew up in a scenario where you could not trust your family and friends, at least me, with your feelings. It was like, oh, don't worry about it. They didn't have the capacity. They didn't have the emotional capacity to handle those emotions. And so being in a relationship with someone who can handle that is a completely different experience. It's a whole nother world.
One of the things that you also just kind of mentioned, which I think is really important, is this notion of acceptance, right? That people should love other people for being them. And I know in our work together, that was sometimes a challenge challenge for you, right?
Totally.
Why is he this way? Why does he do that? Why doesn't he do this? Right? Yeah. So let's talk about that journey for you. How were you able to start accepting more and judging less? Right.
I think that, and I was just having this conversation the other day, I think that how I grew up I grew up in a very judgmental environment. And so people had to act a certain way, they had to dress a certain way, they had to speak a certain way, they had to kind of present a certain way, they had to do everything just right. And if they didn't, then it was behind closed doors, they get talked about like a dog. And I definitely grew up that way. I participated in that because that's how I grew up. And I didn't understand that there was like another world out there where people just loved each other and tried to just like accept people for who they showed up as. And so it was very, very difficult for me to break out of that. And I've had some situations personally where I'm not as close with some of my family members as I would like to be. Part of that is because it's very difficult for me to be in those scenarios without feeling pulled back into some of that mindset. I'm really trying to work myself out of that so I can be more loving and then in turn accept more love, because I always felt like if I was this way, then I would be good enough. If I had all my ducks in a row, then I would be good enough and therefore I would be worthy of love and therefore everything would go perfectly. And when in reality, obviously that's not the case. I'm not perfect. I'm just a normal person. And I think that it made it very difficult for me to accept unconditional love from my partner, from my mom, from my friends. I always felt like
from yourself.
From myself. I definitely could not love myself. That's definitely true. So
thank you for sharing that. Okay, so let's talk about some of the changes that you were able to make in the program. What did you notice and what maybe did other people notice?
I think first and foremost, I cried a lot more. That's the most visceral change that has happened.
We made the thug cry.
Listen, I've been crying. Listen, I was missed no tears.
Yes.
Was never gonna see me cry. What did Beyonce say? I commit suicide before you see a tear fall down my face. Okay,
right.
That was the type that's the type of mindset that I came from, because I would never let anyone see me be vulnerable. First of all, I'm an ugly crier. Okay, so let's start there.
Join the club, girl. Join the club. When you're not used to crying, then it has to come out ugly.
Right, it's got to, because it has no choice.
Uncontrollable.
It's a waterfall. So that was the first big change, is that I cried more. I cried more at movies. And I realized that's why I don't like to watch movies sometimes, because they make me upset, because I feel more feelings and I don't like that.
And you allowed yourself to feel.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
Even though
have
we don't like to cry. But
sometimes if you cry around people, sometimes they'll be like, stop crying, don't cry. Your pet could have died, your parent could have died, and they'd be like, don't cry, you'll be okay. So pick yourself up. And you see that on TV, you see that all the time, especially in Real Housewives and Married to Medicine, where people are in emotional turmoil and people are like, stop crying, your face. You can't let them see you cry. Right. And that's something that I think we as Black people just carry, and it's very heavy.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to deal with emotions because we're already dealing with so much externally. But that's again another conversation. But the first thing, I would definitely cry all the time, or I just might be sad.
Yeah.
And not maybe any for any particular reason. Maybe I'm hormonal. Maybe I just had a bad day or something, or saw a video on Facebook that it would make me upset.
And I know people are at home listening like, well, why would I want that? Why was that good for you?
Oh my goodness. I think, first of all, there's less tension in my body.
Yeah.
There's less tension in my body physically. I've been going to get massages lately, thanks to the privilege of my job. And the massage therapist was like, how's the tension? How's everything going with the tension? How are you feeling? And I'm like, can you lighten up, please? And then finally, this is after the third session, he's like, I've had to be as light as well with you. You really have a lot of tension in your body physically.
Yeah.
And I realized I don't like being poked because it hurts me physically and things like that. And so it's helping me release the tension in my body. It's also helping me in the biggest way, in addition to just being more in touch with my emotions, is for years and years and years, I have been a binge eater, huge. And this is this eating disorder disclaimer warning. I've been a huge binge eater for years. And so I mean, again, because I never really was able to express myself myself emotionally and be vulnerable with safety. Now I'm able to, like, some of my habits have changed. I used to eat out a lot because it was a reward for me after I've been sitting at my desk all day. And now it's like, it doesn't even cross my mind to go out to eat. Not that going out to eat in and of itself is bad, so I don't want to say that, but just it's helped me realize, like, well, what actually do I really want to do?
Yeah.
I'm not numbing myself through food, through video games, through whatever else. Like, I'm able to just kind of be like, well, what do I really need? How can I actually decompress truly so that I can calm down? Do I need a hot shower? Do I need to listen to calming sounds? Do I need a sound bath? Do I need to get some exercise? I'm just more connected physically with my mental, my spiritual is very much more connected to my body.
Yeah.
And
I love
it's helped
that.
a lot.
That's amazing.
Sorry, I feel like that was long, but...
Oh, that's so great. I'm so excited about that. So let's talk a little bit more about maybe some of the things that you've learned, right? That maybe you didn't know before, but that have been really helpful for you, right? I mean, obviously you've gone through and you've talked already about so many things that you've done and some of the changes that you've had, but were there any sort of concepts that like were a game changer for you or that really like shifted your worldview or perspective that like you didn't know before?
Totally. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've learned, and this is in relation to being in a relationship with like a masculine man or a masculine energy, is that if I want to operate in a more relaxed, calming energy, I just have to be, and I just have to know what I want. And once I express what it is that I want, then the masculine energy, they naturally come in and take care of it and make it happen. And that was the biggest thing that's definitely stuck with me over the last several months, is that I don't need to wrestle. I don't need to kind of finagle and make certain things happen or make certain things work. I just have to know what it is that I want. And sometimes I think I was confused about what I wanted because there's a lot of information about there, what you should want. And I really had to kind of get clear about what specifically do I want. And I just have to express it. And that's it.
And we were able to do that quite a bit in this program.
Absolutely.
And I think it was really funny and interesting that like once we did that and then your man like showed up and did it for you, you were like hella surprised.
Oh my God. Number one, I was not only surprised, I was freaked out.
Hi girl, why?
I was freaked out because I was like, no, wait a minute. No, we're supposed to argue about this more. Like, we're supposed to have more tension. I don't know how I feel about this not having tension thing. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Part of me is like enjoyed a little bit of that tension to try to say, well, I'm worthy of this. Mm-hmm. But I think after just saying, this is what I would like, and him just saying, okay, and him taking care of it, it really made me uncomfortable because it's like, well, then I still have to work through my feelings about that because I still don't know why it makes me uncomfortable. I'm still working through that for sure. But I think it makes me feel how high can this go? Like, what's the limit?
No limit.
What I mean?
No limit soldiers,
no
girl.
Limit.
No limit soldiers.
It just made me feel like, well, it opens a world of possibilities to me that I just didn't think I had available to me.
Yeah, I think, okay, so we're sharing a part of this, but this also was about you communicating differently, right?
Sure.
And using different verbiage and different words and different tones in a way that could be digestible for your partner, right? So I don't want to skip over that because I think that's a very important part of the work that we have been able to do together so that you could be heard and understood and seen. And so, yes, your guy is doing a lot of different things. I think you guys had an amazing Valentine's Day and other amazing dates and great trips and things like that. But it was also because of the way that you were communicating.
Totally. I expressed, I feel X. I feel like this. And I would like you. And, what I want is Y. I think I was so convinced that I needed to express, well, this is the right way because you should do this the way that I wanted you to do it because of logic point A or whatever. Right. But that was not, that just opens up an argument, right? Because everyone doesn't think the same way.
Yeah, you giving PowerPoint presentations, girl.
Right. Okay, I'm giving PowerPoint presentations. He's taking notes. I'm over here trying to present my case. And the issue is that I didn't need to present a case.
That's
right. There's never any need to present my case.
That's a trauma response, right?
Totally.
That you have to try to prove all of that so that they can do it for you instead of, no, that's just what I want. You get to just receive that, right? So I'm glad that you have been able to actually experience that and realize that that's open for and available to you more so than anything else. So that's something that is so exciting. Now, you are with your guy. You have been going on for more than 2 years now. Yes. Almost 3.
Almost 3.
Almost 3. And so that's really exciting. What has your partner said about the way that you've been showing up in this relationship?
I think he's a little less on edge. Like, I think he feels like we're having more conversations about how I feel because I have to have conversations about them, about my feelings. But I think he feels more like heard and understood, definitely. And I think he would say that I've shown up in a more relaxed way. Maybe not relaxed. Maybe relaxed isn't the right word, but like in a way that's less combative. Because again, I was used to having to be combative. And I think I have just simply said, like, this is what I want by this time. This is what I want by the time we do X. And it gives him more clarity too, because I think we're not arguing over, well, this is wrong because of that, or because I disagree with you on this other point. It's more about like, this is just how I feel.
Yeah.
Like, I can't argue with, like, we can argue facts all day, but this is how I just feel. And so at the end of the day, like, this is what I would like. And therefore.
Would you say that your relationship has stayed the same, gotten worse, or improved? Be honest.
I think it's definitely improved. I think we still have some things that we're working on, as all relationships have, I think, but I think it's definitely improved. And I feel at ease with like, how do I handle different situations that come up, right? Because we started dating before the pandemic, and then we moved in together during the pandemic and still live together now.
Yeah.
And so 2 years of our relationship has been in one place at the same time. So we didn't have all those experiences of like going out and dating more and kind of just like experiencing life on the outside. I call it a life on the outside, but we didn't have a whole lot of that as we were trying to establish our relationship. And so now I think we're having that experience. And so there's a lot of things that are still kind of coming up because of that. Yeah. And so I think we're working through it. We have a framework now to kind of evaluate, like, okay, what are we going to do next? Are we going to handle who's going to watch what movie tonight, or like how we're going to handle trips and things like that? And so it's been super, super helpful, very helpful.
Good. Now, girl, obviously there are people listening and they're like, I don't know if I want to work with him or not. What would you tell them? What would you say to them about your experience and, honestly about what you think that all of these ladies listening should do?
I think that what you teach and how you've helped me approach relationships, it's not something that I've actually gotten in therapy. I think and I'm not saying this against therapy, because trust me, I'm in therapy, but I think it's one of those things that is a very practical evaluation of what it is that you actually want out of your relationships in general, but especially out of romantic relationships. And I think you're a specialist, you're an expert in this field. And I think if you're looking as a woman or whomever to figure out how you can get out of the ruts of what you've been doing in your dating life and how you've been showing up, then don't even just call, figure out if you're a vibe or whatever, and I'm sure you will, and sign up. Because I definitely, if I could do all the 6 months over again, I would do it in a heartbeat in 2 seconds. I just think it's been super valuable and worth everything that I went through emotionally to get to where I am now. Now, regardless of how my partner and I do, which I'm sure we're going to be fine, but regardless of that, I feel like I could go into any relationship feeling confident, but also calm, because I have tools now to express myself. I know what a little bit of my blind spots are. Yeah. So I have a way to kind of evaluate not only what it is I want out of a relationship, but how I want to show up.
That's amazing.
I think that's a huge.
I think sometimes people think that I think people think the work is like just getting the guy and then you're good to go. But I think it's important for people to understand that this program is really setting you up for a lifetime of skills and tools that you can use not just in your romantic relationship, but in all of your relationships. And so I think relationships equal love, and love equals happiness at the end of the day. So what we're doing here is really trying to make sure that you have the happiest life possible for optimal satisfaction. And so, Sunny, I want to thank you so much for being here with me and sharing your experiences in the program. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this conversation and probably see themselves in a lot of what you've said. So I just want to share you for being vulnerable and just telling the tea straight, no chaser.
Yeah, straight, no chaser, all day, every day. Listen, it's been a pleasure, and I'd happily come back and have more conversations again, because I want to share how transformational this program has been for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sunny. And with that said, bye-bye.
Bye.